This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Mateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. China's Communist Party marks its 105th year with a reality check. President Xi Jinping urging officials to prepare for a new era of turbulence and transformation. Now, today also marks 29 years since Hong Kong's handover. Chief Executive John Lee sets out his priorities, betting on the city's first five-year plan to drive growth. A deepening alliances in the Indo-Pacific. The Japanese Prime Minister is set to meet with her Indian counterpart in New Delhi, with discussions expected to center on economic security, AI, and defense. Also, a currency retreat across Asia. Another 40-year low for the Japanese yen, while the Korean won nears a global financial crisis low, as investors dump regional stocks and pile into the US dollar. Also tonight, Asian airlines have been enjoying a windfall on European routes since the Iran conflict started. But a rebound by Gulf rivals is raising doubts about whether they can maintain their edge. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called on the ruling Communist Party to keep pace with changing times while safeguarding the advances it has made during celebrations for the party's 105th founding anniversary. Now, Mr. Xi says under the party's leadership, China has become a builder of world peace and a defender of the international order. And he calls on members to remain firm in their convictions and to continue working towards the party's goals. And we've got CNA's senior China editor Olivia Seong and correspondent Rebecca Mateo joining us live from our Beijing studio. So, Ollie, perhaps you could first up walk us through some of the key takeaways from Mr. Xi's 40-minute address.
Well, I'll tell you, the entire ceremony commemorating the founding anniversary of the party was one that was as much about the future as it was about the party's past. We saw members gathered at Beijing's Great Hall of the People, where the centerpiece of the proceedings was that 40-minute speech by President Xi. The themes were not new. We had heard them before. After all, President Xi has also been the general secretary of the party since 2012 and has had time to set out his position on numerous occasions. And he continued to hail the achievements of the party over the last 105 years, saying that it was the main factor and driving force behind China's rise. But what was new was that President Xi did urge the party to strengthen its ability to anticipate risks and respond to challenges, as he warned that the world is entering a new period of turbulence. But we do have to point out that President Xi didn't go into the specifics or name the challenges or spell out the exact policy solutions that would be ahead to address these challenges, from a slowing growth as its economy pivots to counting on innovation to drive growth, or whether it comes to a rapidly aging population or its strategic competition with the West.
更好统筹国内国际两个大局，统筹发展和安全，提高科学预见、变化、及时洞察风险，有效应对挑战的能力，确保中华复兴号巨轮劈波斩浪，行稳致远。
Well, President Xi also handing out the July 1st medal to outstanding members. Rebecca, can you tell us more about that?
That's right. So the July 1st medal was given to 8 party members. And, earlier President Xi had described the recipients of this medal to, be everyday heroes. So they are really, people in the party. And among this year's recipients, we have a rural doctor, someone who led the village from poverty to a model village, and even someone who contributed to the aluminum manufacturing sector in China. Now, this award was first given out in 2021 when the party was celebrating its 100th year anniversary, and it will be given out every 5 years whenever the party celebrates its major milestone anniversaries. So from the awards, we can also see the type of people that the party really wants to recognize. And if you note, they are prominently from science and technology backgrounds. And, the party also took the occasion to recognize some of the other several hundreds party members who have worked hard in areas in their schools, in their social organizations and hospitals, for example. So let's hear more from Takaichi, who is seen as Xi's chief of staff, and he has said that these people are role models.
严守纪律规矩，以谏修身，严于律己，真做清正廉洁的模范。
So, Olivia, what are the next steps for the party? I think President Xi also talked about the party's fight against corruption.
Yeah, building off that soundbite that we heard just there, President Xi signaled that there will be no let-up in the party's anti-corruption campaign, which in recent years we know has reached the highest ranks of China's military, with a string of senior officers as well as Politburo members either being investigated for corruption or being removed from their post. And President Xi used the speech also to call for a stronger military under tighter party leadership as China continues with its military modernization.
我们党清醒认识到，打铁必须自身硬，坚决清除一切损害党的先进性和纯洁性的因素，清除一切 侵蚀党的健康机体的病毒，在革命性锻造中更加坚强有力。
And like in other similar occasions, we also saw President Xi in that speech make mention of Hong Kong and the self-ruled island of Taiwan, reiterating Beijing's position on that.
解决台湾问题，实现祖国完全统一，是我们党矢志不渝的历史任务，是全体中华儿女的共同愿望。坚决打击台独分裂势力，反对外部势力干涉，坚定推进祖国统一大业。
Well, those were the proceedings generally at the Great Hall of the People, but in our reporting, we're also keen to know what the regular folk in China feel about this anniversary. Rebecca, you were out talking to people. What did they tell you?
Yes, I was up very early at the Museum of the Communist Party of China. That's just beside Beijing's Olympic Park. And, that museum opened in 2021. And for this year, for its 105th anniversary, there will be 4 new exhibitions featuring urban governance and also arts and culture. Now, when I was there, just slightly before 9 a.m., before the museum opened its doors, I saw groups of people queuing outside waiting to enter the museum for today. And many of them appear to be from government agencies and organizations. And I saw a group of train conductors, for example. And I spoke to several visitors as well as people on the streets, some of them who were not headed for the museum. And I was kind of curious about what they really think about the anniversary. And I spoke to one senior who told me that he's particularly worried about bread and butter issues, for example, access to affordable health care, and also other people who told me about areas they want to see improvements in. Let's have a listen.
今天我们是组织我们社区的党员，今天这个也就是汇聚党心，一起参加活动，不是挺好吗？
我还是希望你在物理呀、数学呀、航天航空这块大力发展。
我希望中国肯定以后是越来越包容，然后越来越国际化，走向世界，然后在国际社会中发挥更稳定的作用。
So for many people, I think the anniversary is more than just about the party's past achievements, but also more about what it means for their future. That's the sense I get, at least.
Yeah, and this event and anniversary also coming at a pivotal time for the party. What happening next and what we'll be looking out for, as well is the party holding its next 5-yearly National Congress that's set for next year, and when we expect a new leadership lineup to be unveiled. All this coming at a time where the world's attention is on Asia's largest economy. And we'll leave the discussion here. For now, back to you, Oteli.
Hey, thanks so much for your insights on the CPC's 105th anniversary. CNA's senior China editor Liv Yus-Yong and correspondent Rebecca Mateo from our Beijing studio. Right, a quick look now at the mainland markets as investors digest President Xi Jinping's keynote speech. Well, it looks like the two mainland indices diverging at the closing bell as investors looked out for key signals on how the world's second largest economy is navigating mounting domestic pressures and global trade uncertainties. China's stock market has split sharply this year, with AI supply chain shares rallying to record highs, while weak domestic demand weighed on traditional sectors. Hong Kong markets are closed for a holiday. Japan and India are looking to take their partnership to the next level as Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and Narendra Modi prepare to hold talks in New Delhi. Economic security is expected to top the agenda, with resilient supply chains, artificial intelligence and other critical technologies also in focus. Ms. Takaichi and Mr. Modi are also expected to deepen defense and maritime cooperation as they look to advance a free and open Indo-Pacific. Now, their summit could also deliver new agreements on energy security, including cooperation on liquefied natural gas. And to tell us more, we've got Neha Punia for CNA joining us live from New Delhi. Neha, first up, perhaps tell us why this visit matter now for both sides, and also how much continuity are we seeing with Japan's diplomacy?
Well, Oteli, New Delhi is rolling out the red carpet. Sanae Takaichi will land here in just a few hours' time. And ahead of her arrival, she has published an expansive editorial in a leading Indian daily, The Times of India, where she has painted the context against which her first visit to India is taking place. She's said that these are trying and testing times, speaking about the sort of uncertainty that exists, not just in the geopolitical global order, but also in the global economy. And she's quoted Shinzo Abe's words from the past, where he had said that a strong Japan means a strong India and vice versa, to say that she believes that still stands true. Many have said that she is carrying Abe's legacy forward in many ways by how she is looking to engage with New Delhi. And she talks about how that's why it's important for both Tokyo and New Delhi to leverage their shared interests to ensure that they build resilience and they prosper, which is why one key area of focus is going to be building the idea of economic security. We've seen how the war in West Asia has disrupted supply chains, disrupted the supply of energy to the Indo-Pacific. It's also shone a spotlight on critical technologies and how they're being used by different countries around the world. So all of this is going to focus in discussions with the Indian Prime Minister. Mr. Modi was in Japan in August last year, and Sanae Takaichi saying she's carrying forward the baton by coming to New Delhi. It's going to be the 16th annual India-Japan summit when she sits down to talk to Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Thursday. They're going to discuss artificial intelligence, like you said, but there's also going to be possibly a talk about, stockpiling liquefied natural gas so they can protect their economies from future global supply shocks, and also possibly discussing a yen-rupee settlement for trade payments, which would reduce their reliance on the US dollar.
And also, Neha, like all bilateral ties, it's usually a two-way street. So tell us how much of this growing security cooperation is being driven by the shared strategic concerns that they have.
Most of it, if you see that editorial that Sanae Takaichi has published, she references what Shinzo Abe, the father of the Indo-Pacific, who first conceptualized the Indo-Pacific, as a maritime region that encompasses two oceans, had said. And she's talking about how there is an urgent need to ensure that global powers don't have, full control over the Indo-Pacific, that this is a region that helps every country grow. She's talking about the need to uphold the idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific. She's not directly referenced anyone, but experts say this is, of course, a reference to China. You have India and Tokyo, both part of the Quad grouping that also includes Australia and the United States. But given how much of America's focus has been on the conflict in West Asia, there have been concerns about what that means for the Quad's future, which is why Sanae Takaichi is saying that there's a compelling reason for both countries to work together. There likely won't be any direct references to China, but that's certainly going to be something that they discuss. And, we should look out for things like defense cooperation, maritime exercises, information sharing. All of that is likely going to be announced when the two leaders meet.
Right, many thanks for that update on Japan-India relations. Neha Punia for CNA, speaking to us from New Delhi. Right, we are going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, a changing balance of power in global development finance. The World Bank is set to stop lending to China by 2031 after years of pressure from the US and others. Japan and India could be moving closer to bypass the US dollar in some trade payments. More on that when we return. Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia Tonight. Well, it is now time for your business news, and we have Olivia Marzuki standing by for the very latest. So, Liv, governments are apparently tightening their grip on a critical technology even beyond their own borders. What's up with that?
That's right, Oteli. So China is the latest to put more guardrails as economic security becomes just as important as national security. China has introduced sweeping new rules, giving Beijing greater oversight of overseas investments involving sensitive technology. The regulations, which took effect today, create China's first comprehensive legal framework governing outbound investment. They empower authorities to block or unwind deals deemed to threaten national security. The rules restrict the overseas transfer of control technologies, data, and technical expertise. They also allow Beijing to retaliate if it believes other countries are discriminating against Chinese investors. Analysts say that the move reflects Beijing's determination to keep advanced technologies at home as geopolitical and trade tensions intensify. The regulations follow recent scrutiny of cross-border tech deals. They are expected to reshape how Chinese companies expand overseas, particularly in sectors such as AI and semiconductors. The World Bank will reportedly end lending to China by 2031. It is pending a review by the lender's board in late July, although no formal vote is needed. A World Bank official said that the relationship with China is reaching a new phase, as the country had made significant development advances over the past few decades. The weaning off comes with Beijing's agreement, though the institution has been under lots of pressures from the U.S. to cut funding. The Financial Times reports that from now until 2031, the multilateral lender will limit the total amount that Beijing can borrow to no more than $2 billion. The World Bank's lending to China has declined in recent years, from $2.42 billion in 2017 to just $750 million last year. Washington has welcomed the move, saying that China should not be receiving handouts on the basis of its position in the global economy. The U.S. also calls on other development banks to phase out their lending to Beijing. Now, let's walk you through the institution that is the World Bank and the role that it plays in the global economy. The World Bank was established in July 1944, together with the International Monetary Fund, as the fruits of the Bretton Woods Conference in New Hampshire. It underpinned the post-war global economic order until its de facto end in 1971, when President Richard Nixon took the U.S. dollar off the gold standard. The group today comprises 5 organizations, but it's the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, or IBRD, and the International Development Association, or IDA, that are together widely known as the World Bank. The IBRD provides low-interest loans to middle-income and credit-worthy lower-middle-income countries, while the IDA provides little to zero interest loans to low-income countries. For the last fiscal year, the IBRD committed more than $40 billion in loans and the IDA just under $40 billion. Now, these two agencies forming the bulk of the World Bank Group's total lending. Top borrower for fiscal 2025 were Brazil, Turkey, and Argentina. The World Bank's position in global developmental finance has come under criticism. Governance is heavily skewed towards richer nations, which provide more to the bank. The U.S. itself has the largest voting share at almost 16%. The Washington-based organization also traditionally has an American chief. The dominance of the World Bank has also been challenged in recent years with the establishment of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank by China and the New Development Bank by the BRICS nations. Well, Japan and India are reportedly moving to advance plans for a local currency settlement framework. It will allow direct yen-rupee transactions for bilateral trade, bypassing the U.S. dollar. Nikkei reports that the initiative will be included in a joint statement to be released after the country's leaders meet in New Delhi this week. International payments are typically routed through major Western financial institutions. For transactions between countries using different currencies, the U.S. dollar usually serves as the intermediary. Under the proposed framework, Japanese non-residents would be allowed to open accounts at Indian banks, enabling financial institutions to settle payments directly in yen and rupees. Now, the system is expected to be available to major commercial banks in both countries. By simplifying cross-border transactions, Tokyo hopes to support Japanese companies expanding into India and encourage greater private sector investment. Speaking of yen, the Japanese currency extending its slide, staying in the 162 per dollar range, its weakest in almost 40 years. And this comes less than 2 months after authorities mounted a record round of forex intervention in April and May. Raising more questions, what is behind the yen's weakness? Meantime, business sentiment climbed to an 8-year high, while corporate inflation expectations reached a record high. Analysts say that the data underscores the economy's resilience despite the Middle East conflict, strengthening the case for further rate hikes. It will also feed into the Bank of Japan's quarterly growth and inflation forecasts due next month. Traders will be looking out for clues on when the BOJ would raise interest rates again after lifting them to 1% in June, the highest level in 31 years. South Korea's won headed towards its weakest level since the global financial crisis, leading a retreat in Asian currencies today. And this comes as the U.S. dollar rises and overseas investors sold local equities. The Kospi plunged by as much as 4% before ending the day 2% softer. Samsung Electronics fell around 6% and SK Hynix lost at least 3%. Today's foreign outflows follow a record $58 billion sell-off from the broader market last quarter, driven by global funds hitting exposure limits to Samsung and SK Hynix, alongside shifting sentiment towards the AI trade. Staying in South Korea, exports in the country hit a record high in June, topping $100 billion for the first time, led by booming demand for AI-related semiconductors. Exports jumped 71% from a year ago to $102 billion, while the trade surplus reached a record $36 billion. Semiconductor shipments nearly tripled to almost $45 billion, fueled by strong demand for AI memory chips. Computer products surged, alongside gains in smartphones and automobiles. China and the U.S. were South Korea's largest markets, with exports reaching about $20 billion each. Now, for the first half of the year, South Korea's exports rose 48% to a record $497 billion. And officials say that AI-driven chip demand continues to power growth, but warn of potential headwinds to exports in the coming months, including U.S. tariffs, volatile oil prices, and a global economic slowdown. I have more business news a bit later in this segment, especially the hot AI topics for you, Oteli. But for now, it's back to you.
All right, looking forward to that. Chat with you later then, Liz. Right, coming up on East Asia tonight, President Xi Jinping has urged officials to adapt to changing times while staying true to the Communist Party's core mission during its founding anniversary. We are going to be speaking with an expert to unpack his remarks and what they could mean for China. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi set to hold talks with her Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi, in New Delhi, with a view to strengthening economic and security ties. The Chinese President Xi Jinping urges officials to prepare for a new era of turbulence and transformation as the ruling Communist Party marks its founding anniversary. And Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee bets on the city's first 5-year plan to drive growth as the former British territory marks 29 years since its return to China. Well, from a small revolutionary movement to the political force that governs the world's second largest economy, here is a brief history of the Chinese Communist Party. When it was founded in 1921, few could have predicted the role the party would play one day. And it began with around 50 members seeking to reshape a China weakened by political turmoil, foreign intervention, and warlord rule. Less than 3 decades later came its first defining milestone. In October 1949, after years of civil war, communist forces led by Mao Zedong established the People's Republic of China. Well, the party went from fighting for power to governing the world's most populous country. The next major turning point came in 1978. Under Deng Xiaoping, China launched its policy of reform and opening up. Markets were gradually introduced, foreign investment welcomed, and the country shifted from a largely agrarian economy to one driven by manufacturing, exports, and later innovation. Over the following decades, hundreds of millions of people were lifted out of poverty, while China emerged as a major economic and trading power. Another chapter began in 2012 when Xi Jinping became the party's general secretary. His leadership has been marked by a stronger emphasis on party control, national security, technological self-reliance, and expanding China's international profile. Today, 105 years after its founding, the Communist Party governs the world's second largest economy with more than 100 million members. Its decisions influence not only China's future, but also global trade, technology, diplomacy, and security. Now, lots to unpack here, and to help us understand more, let's bring in Professor Steve Tsang, Director of the SOAS China Institute at the SOAS University of London. Well, thanks, Professor, for joining us this evening. So first up, let's just look at some of the core themes of President Xi's address today. Walk us through some of the signals or foundations that you think he's trying to lay down ahead of next year's major party congress.
I think what Xi Jinping is pushing is what he has been saying for quite a while, which is that he would like China to focus on cutting-edge technologies and become a leader in those technologies and in setting rules for the new technological world, making China not dependent on other countries for its development and prosperity and capacity to move forward. He is not thinking about simply everyday living situations in China.
Professor, let's talk about some of the headwinds that President Xi didn't directly address. Because on one hand, he was talking up a strong unified party, but the reality on the ground somewhat appears messy because you've got a rapidly aging population, you've got the trade war with the West. So given all of that, how is Beijing re-evaluating its opportunities, especially when it's betting big on innovation?
Well, Xi Jinping is focusing on building China to be a globally preeminent power, using and relying on the Communist Party to unify and galvanize the country into delivering the objectives he has set for the country. The other problems, your problems with the debt, your problem with low consumption, your problem with the real estate bursting, your problem with an unbalanced economy, your problem with demographics. From his perspective, all these can be resolved if the party is unified and following his leadership and use that combined power to mobilize the country to move forward.
And another major theme was about party discipline, was about internal governance. And the speech placed quite a heavy emphasis on purifying the party, tackling internal discipline. So, Professor Zhang, what does that tell us about where the whole anti-corruption drive is headed next?
Well, the anti-corruption drive, from when it was introduced in 2012, after Xi Jinping became the top leader in China, was always meant to ratify the party and make the party unite behind Xi Jinping's own leadership. And that hasn't changed. If anything, he is doubling down on that. So the direction of travel was being set from the very beginning. He is sticking to it very closely. And if there's any problem, he sees those problems as arising by people in the party not embracing and implementing the guidelines he had issued before, and therefore requires them to do so. And the anti-corruption drive is something that he will keep on using to make sure that the senior leadership will follow him strictly and use that to enforce the same party discipline on the rest of the Communist Party and therefore the country.
And at the same time, it seems like the party continues to expand its ranks. The CPC admitted 1 million new members, and each of them undergoing apparently a rigorous year-long vetting process. What's driving these people to join the party today?
Well, people like to join the winner. And under Xi Jinping, the Communist Party is the winner. The Communist Party is being put at the center of everything. Xi Jinping said the party leads everything, everywhere, at all times. Now, before Xi Jinping, the private sector was actually very strong, very vibrant, and expanding opportunities for people and providing an alternative route for people to go into the private sector, not joining either the civil service or the party ranks, and can still move forward very, very well. The private sector is doing a bit rather less well than it was before Xi Jinping, and therefore people would see the party and the civil service as a more attractive career track for the ambitious and able.
So, Professor Zhang, looking beyond today's speech, let's look ahead to the next 5 years. What do you see as the single biggest challenge facing the CPC, and how do you think that's going to shape future policy direction?
Well, the biggest challenges are, first and foremost, those long-standing domestic problems with the economy and with development generally. We already mentioned quite a few of them, whether we're talking about the debt level, the imbalance in the economy, and the poor consumption in China, and the level of productivity. All these problems will need to be resolved. I think for the next 5 years, China may also have to be prepared to deal with the unexpected, which is that there may be a turn in the global economy which can have much more significant implications for the Chinese economy and therefore aggravate the kind of problems that are already in place in the domestic Chinese economy. And the party will have to have a way to deal with them. Otherwise, people seeing persistent fall in living standards may well have a bit of a problem with simply embracing and supporting Xi Jinping in doing whatever Xi Jinping wants them to do.
Well, always good speaking with you and getting your insights. Thanks so much for your time and thoughts. Professor Steve Zhang, Director of the SOAS China Institute at the SOAS University of London. Now, in other news, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has pledged stronger ties with China in a congratulatory message to President Xi as Beijing marks the anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China. Mr. Kim says that the two countries will keep strengthening relations centered on socialism. The message comes weeks after President Xi made a rare visit to Pyongyang, where the two leaders pushed for closer diplomatic, law enforcement and military cooperation. Mr. Kim described the recent summit as a historic occasion. China remains North Korea's largest economic partner. It reportedly accounted for nearly 98% of the country's foreign trade in 2024. Celebrations in Hong Kong as it marks 29 years since its return to China. Chief Executive John Lee setting out his priorities for the final year of his term. He says the city's first five-year plan will be key to driving economic and social development, while stressing the need to prepare for an increasingly competitive world.
香港繼續蟬聯世界最自由經濟體榜首。面對外部環境競爭激烈，科技革命加速演進，我哋必須以更長遠嘅視野、更系統嘅部署，改革創新。
Now, a new China law goes into effect today that has provisions which could hold overseas individuals and organizations responsible for undermining ethnic unity. Well, the legislation states that it is enacted to realize the rejuvenation of the nation. On Taiwan, the bill says that China will act to, quote, enhance Taiwanese compatriots' sense of belonging and identification with the Chinese people. President Xi also made reference to the island today, saying that resolving the Taiwan question and achieving what he calls complete unification remains an unwavering mission of his party and a shared aspiration of all Chinese people. A provision in the new law, though, is raising concerns and even criticisms. Article 63 allows China to take legal action against organizations and individuals overseas that it deems to have run afoul of the law. Some observers fear that it could be used to target critics and Taiwanese people who oppose unification. Taiwan's Premier Cho Jung-tai says that the island will protect its people. The main opposition party, Kuomintang, on the other hand, warns against any knee-jerk reaction.
我会认为说，之前曾经提过，我觉得先不要去预设立场，说他们一定会针对海外人士去做出一定程度的限制。毕竟来说，他们的宪法，他们要怎么样执行法律是他们的决定。那我个人认为，针对说这个片面改变现状这件事情，我想已经不只是两岸之间不得片面改变现状这件事情，不只是两岸之间的共识，也是全球国际之间的共识。
Well, time now for another break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Japan wants to build its own AI model and put 10 million robots to work by 2040. We look at Tokyo's push to reduce reliance on US and Chinese technology. Our time now for Olivia once again to bring us up to speed with the latest business news. So, Liv, let's talk about investors here. They've been rewarding companies for AI spending, but that comes with a cost, apparently.
It is. So, Atali, we're seeing a pattern across big tech companies talking about big investments for the future, but they're making tough decisions today on their manpower situation. Microsoft is reportedly planning another round of job cuts with layoffs affecting fewer than 2.5% of its global workforce. Thousands of positions could be affected across its sales, consulting, and Xbox gaming division. The company employed around 228,000 full-time staff as of the end of June 2025. In July last year, it announced laying off nearly 4% of its workforce in one of the biggest rounds of job cuts in recent years. Now, the latest layoff report also comes as Microsoft's Xbox business continues to undergo restructuring. Microsoft is the latest big tech to reduce headcount as firms look to control costs while continuing to invest heavily in AI. Meta and Amazon have also announced significant job cuts earlier this year. U.S. President Donald Trump has declared more than $1 billion in earnings from cryptocurrency ventures last year. Filings show Mr. Trump received more than $500 million from his ties to World Liberty Financial, that is a crypto startup that he co-founded with his sons and his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, whose son serves as CEO. Mr. Trump receives more than $600 million in royalties for his namesake digital coin launched hours before his inauguration in January 2025. The crypto windfall is by far his largest source of income. It dwarfs the $77 million he made in resort revenue from the Mar-a-Lago resort and $25 million from his Northern Virginia Golf Club. The financial disclosure has reignited concerns that Mr. Trump is profiting from the presidency, and the White House has rejected any conflicts of interest and blamed Democrats for pushing what it calls, quote, a false narrative. Google could face a hefty fine in South Korea after the country's antitrust watchdog accused the tech giant of abusing its dominance in the Android app market. If found to have broken competition law, Google could be fined up to 6% of the $9 billion in revenue linked to the case. Regulators say that Google rewarded game developers when they placed their services on Google Play instead of giving rival app stores a better deal. The antitrust watchdog says this stifled competition as it discouraged developers from using alternative platforms, including South Korea's One Store. Now, the case reflects growing global scrutiny over whether major tech platforms are unfairly limiting developers' choices and competition. Google denies any wrongdoing. Global users can soon regain access to Anthropic's most powerful AI models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5. That's after the U.S. government reversed export restrictions it imposed last month over national security concerns. The restrictions has forced the company to suspend access to the two AI models amid fears they could be misused by military or intelligence actors in countries including Russia and China. Reuters reports that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick told Anthropic in a letter that they no longer require an export license after they agreed to proactively detect and address security risks associated with the technology and coordinate more closely with the government on future model launches. But the government's vetting process for access to frontier AI models has drawn criticism over how those decisions are being made. Japan plans to develop a homegrown artificial intelligence model and deploy 10 million AI-powered robots across more than a dozen industries by 2040. The country will reportedly invest about $6 billion in the AI model, which will be developed by Neutra, a consortium that includes SoftBank and Sony. And the group will focus on physical AI, as Tokyo also unveiled an updated national AI robotics strategy yesterday. Countries around the world are racing to build sovereign AI models to reduce their reliance on technology from the U.S. and China. Just last month, Japan unveiled a 14-year growth strategy aimed at attracting $2.3 trillion in public and private investment. Now, that covers 17 sectors, including physical AI, semiconductors, quantum technology, and nuclear fusion. Neighboring South Korea has also announced record public-private investment worth hundreds of billions of dollars to expand AI data centers and chip making over the coming years. Now, Japan has raised its visa fees fivefold for travelers entering the country. It marks the first increase in almost 5 decades. Starting today, the fee for a single entry visa rises to 15,000 yen. That's about $93. A multiple entry visa now costs 30,000 yen, about $184. Japan's foreign ministry says the fee increase reflects inflation and exchange rate fluctuations. It adds that the hike is unlikely to affect tourism. Still, the move comes as Japan takes another look at how much foreign visitors and residents should pay. Back in May, Japan's upper house passed legislation to sharply raise the ceiling for residence-related fees. These include applications to renew or change visa status or permanent residency. The government says the extra money will help cover the growing administrative costs of managing Japan's foreign population as the country deals with record number of visitors and a surge in foreign residents that has placed considerable strain on infrastructure and public services. Asian airlines that saw a boost in passengers after the Iran conflict disrupted flights through the Middle East are now facing stiffer competition as Gulf carriers return to normal operations. Airlines such as Singapore Airlines, Cathay Pacific, Korean Air, and ANA benefited earlier this year, with more travelers choosing direct routes to Europe, while Gulf hubs face closures and security concerns. But industry data shows that the advantage is fading. Data shows that Gulf carriers such as Emirates and Qatar Airways were carrying almost 1/3 of passengers from Asia to Europe pre-conflict. Gulf hub airports were closed at the start of the war due to drone and missile attacks. But by mid-June, carriers had restored around 90% of their flights. They're also offering lower fares to draw passengers back. The International Air Transport Association reports that Gulf carrier passenger traffic improved between March and May, with the on-year decline narrowing from nearly 60% to 28%. Non-stop traffic from Asia to Europe was up around 30% on-year in March. Now that figure had slimmed to 15% by May. Analysts say that Asian carriers are still enjoying stronger revenues from bookings made during the disruption, but load factors or the percentage of seats filled have begun to ease.
All right, and it looks like you're wrapping East Asia tonight on a business bulletin. That's the first. Thanks so much for that, Olivia. That's right. We are wrapping up Wednesday's edition of East Asia Tonight.
And don't forget headlines anytime at cna.asia. Plus, we're on Facebook and YouTube.
And for our Singapore audience, do stay on. We've got highlights from the FIFA World Cup matches. Thanks for watching. See you again tomorrow.
Kylian Mbappe thought he'd given France the lead against Sweden, but his effort was flagged offside in a close call. But there was only so long France could be kept at bay as Mbappe finally broke the deadlock. France then got a second through Bradley Barcola. And Mbappe sealed a 3-0 win, knocking Sweden out in the process as Les Bleus set up a clash against Paraguay in Philadelphia on Independence Day. A 1-hour storm delay did little to dampen the atmosphere at the Azteca Stadium. A thunderous finish after a lightning run from Julian Quinones saw co-host Mexico take the lead against Ecuador. The Saudi-based player setting his nation on the way to victory and a potential last 16 clash against England. Raul Jimenez wrapped up the win as Mexico recorded their first knockout stage victory in 40 years. A stunning curling effort from Antonio Nusa gave Norway a first-half lead against the Ivory Coast as the Vikings took a 1-goal advantage into the halftime break. The Elephants hit back with their own brilliant strike as Manchester United's Ahmed Diallo gave his nation hope. But cometh the moment, cometh the man, as Erling Haaland scored the winner to put Norway into the next round where they'll face Brazil.